When the conditions get really tough, is the size, the length of your worm, is that important? Good morning, guys and girls. Good morning, November 26th. Everybody had enough leftovers? Has everybody had enough leftovers? I'll tell you what, you'll be eating them for 2 or 3 days. I promise you that. November 26th, we're looking at Psalm 42:1. Psalm 42:1. This is a really pretty one right here. This is one of those beautiful verses that I suppose that was written to be put to music, as most of the Psalms were. This one has been, as a deer thirsts for streams of water, so I thirst for you, God. As a deer thirsts for streams of water, so I thirst for you. Some version says, as a deer pants for water. The biggest deer that I've ever taken with a bow here in Oklahoma came when I was just a teenager, 16 or 17 years old. It was a 12-point, a giant 12-point with massive horns. I know, antlers. Massive horns, long tines. We had no idea how to score a deer back in those days, and I sent that deer over to a taxidermist, and he said it'd be about 4 or 5 months, and so I said, well, that's good. It'll take me a while to save up enough money to pay for it. And somehow I never got that deer back. Somehow that taxidermist said that it was somehow lost. It just disappeared. And I didn't know it at the time, but I've heard since that taxidermists, some of them, are guilty of selling a lot of big trophy mounts. They find someone that will pay a lot more than just the fee for having it mounted. Back then, probably was like $100 or something, but would pay a lot more for that since it was a big trophy, maybe bigger than anything they've ever taken. And so they would sell those big trophy racks. And most of those type taxidermists don't stay in business too awful long. So, but I've heard of that. I've heard of that happen. Anyway, I shot that buck about 45 minutes before dark. And listen to this. This is cool. I had been in that tree since before daylight. Now, I had just simply climbed up that tree and was sitting on and standing on limbs all day long. We had no deer stand, no big Texas hunter deer stand like we have nowadays that are just as comfortable as your living room. We had no heaters. We had nothing like that. We simply crawled up in a tree and dropped a rope down, or had carried a rope up with us. It was tied to our bow, pulled the bow up in the tree, and sat there all day long. We took our food, ate lunch, took a thermos bottle, had coffee, and so forth. So I've been there ever since daylight, all day long in that tree. The key to success that day, it was an extremely dry year, a lot like the year we're having right now. And I was hunting a very tiny little pond in the middle of the woods. The only water in that entire area. When I went over there, I killed it actually in the Cookson Refuge, which is over there by our house, and you had to draw and get a permit, be a lucky draw to get in there. And you could hunt with a gun normally just one day. With a bow, you could hunt the weekend, like a Saturday and Sunday. And I'd scouted a lot, and I'd found that one little water hole way back in I never saw anyone else all day long. But that was the only water in the entire area. Every single deer for miles around had to come to that water when they needed water. Excuse me, Lordy. I swallowed the wrong way. I'm not even eating anything, and I swallowed the wrong way. I tell you what, that memory of that deer, I can still see him walking up there right now. Let me tell you, it was a major feeding period. I'd sit there all day. I'd seen all kinds of deer, nothing big, all kinds of does, little tiny bucks. That water hole was just loaded with all kinds of birds and animals, squirrels and coons and all kinds of birds would come there. And that evening, we must have been a major feeding period because the woods just came alive. It got really, really loud. I didn't understand anything probably at all about the soloner tables back then, but it was probably a major feeding period. And the woods had just come alive. And I had squirrels and stuff eating, and I was up in the tree just really enjoying being there. I was just having a ball watching everything. And then all of a sudden, everything just scattered. And it got deathly quiet. I couldn't hear a bird chirp. I couldn't hear a squirrel barking, nothing. And I looked around and looked around and looked around, and all of a sudden I saw horns coming through the woods, great big giant antlers. And that deer just came up like he was pulled in on a string, walked right up, looked around, and walked right over there, stood into that water. 18 yards away, 18 yards away. We didn't have the bows that we have nowadays, had old compound bow, center punch right through the heart. Absolutely one of the most thrilling things I've ever had happen in hunting, and that's a long time ago. Jesus calls himself the living water, the living water. You remember he told the woman at the well who came up there, he told her all about herself, said she had had 5 husbands, and the man she's living with right now, she wasn't even married to. He told her everything about her life and what type of woman she had become. But she asked him he volunteered to draw some water from the well. And he said, this water, you can drink it all, you're going to get thirsty again. What I have to give you is living water. This water will well up inside your body into a spring gushing with eternal life in heaven. He is, in fact, the only living water available for you and for me. For eternal life in heaven, we got to come to Jesus. We got to come to Jesus. He is our only option. Here's our tip for today. This is kind of funny because this right here, try shortening your plastic worms under tough conditions. Try shortening your plastic worms under tough conditions, even down to 3 or 4 inches. Well, now that's kind of something that's kind of everybody does nowadays. We call them Ned rig, shaky head, stuff like that. I was doing this back when I was a teenager, shortening those worms down small. So it's really nothing new. It's something we did. We didn't really talk about it much, and but I wrote this book back in 2005, and there wasn't any of those things around even back then, and that's not but about 16 or 17 years ago. Guys and girls, go out there and have you a great one today. It's chilly this morning. Remember, I sure do love you.